Hello everybody, I'm back. We had a real long drive out to Wyoming and we finally made it back. Enjoyed a little time with my little family out there, and now I'm going to get back into a few of these haunted presidents. Like I said, we're going to start off with George Washington, and I want to show you real quick two books that I got while I was out there at Yellowstone. I got a spooky Yellowstone book, and it says Tales of Hauntings, Strange Happenings, and Other Local Lore, and Yellowstone Ghost Stories, Spooky Tales from the World's First National Park. So I might intermingle those in with the president ones. So today I'm going to start off with George Washington, which is appropriate since he was our first president. And then I'll do the sketch afterwards. I'll try to hurry through this because I know long videos can be really time consuming and boring. George Washington's ghost is said to have appeared in at least 6 different locations. As is common for ghosts, Washington's shade has been reported at the scene of his death and near his tomb. The shadowy image of the great general and first president also has been reported at Woodland Plantation, which was Washington's wedding gift in 1799 to his nephew Lawrence Lewis and his step-granddaughter Eleanor Nellie Custis. Nellie was the daughter of John Jackie Parke Custis, Washington's stepson. When Jackie died at the age of 27, his widow left her 2 youngest children at Mount Vernon to be raised by George and Martha. The childless Washington became very attached to both Nellie and her brother, George Washington Custis. The 2 step-grandchildren, raised since infancy at Mount Vernon, were more like children to George and Martha. Nellie was the joy of Washington's later years, and he called her his favorite person. When George Washington's ghost appears at Woodlawn, his spirit is making a very personal visit to his favorite grandchild's adult home, a sentimental paternalistic gesture which says much about the private man in contrast to the public hero. His ghost at Woodlawn is that of a kindly, concerned father figure, a loving and indulgent grandfather. The Woodlawn version of Washington's ghost has a gentle and approving smile on his lips. Is Washington's ghost communicating with the shades of his beloved Nellie and her family? We'll never know. When Nellie died at age 73, she was buried at Mount Vernon because she wished to be near her much-beloved grandparents. While Washington's manifestations at Woodlawn have been witnessed by many people over the years, his appearances at the scene of his death in Mount Vernon's master bedroom seem to have ceased after the death of his wife, which followed in 1802, 3 years after his own. While some visitors and staff have sensed Washington's presence at Mount Vernon, a few claim to have actually seen his ghost in his old bed. Unlike many ghosts, famous or otherwise, Washington's spirit is not a restless one, nor a confused soul, wrenched suddenly or violently from the world of the living. His death on December 14, 1799, was peaceful, witnessed by his family, 2 physicians, and his private secretary Tobias Led. Led recounted the great man's last words, "'Tis well." These words have a special meaning to Freemasons. Washington was a well-known Freemason, having served as the Grand Master of Masons in the state of Virginia. "It is well" is the traditional reply of the master of a Masonic lodge when informed that his order has been obeyed. An interesting thing happened after Washington's burial on December 18, 1799. His widow ordered that the master bedroom be sealed shut, never to be entered again in her lifetime. Although other bedrooms were available on the 2nd floor adjacent to the master bedroom, Martha insisted on moving her bedroom to the 3rd floor. Why did Martha, then 68, choose a bedroom up another flight of stairs and, being closer to the roof, with lower ceilings, considerably hotter in summer? Unlike many wealthy couples of the day, George and Martha had always shared one bedroom. Why move to a less convenient, less comfortable bedroom? Allegedly, Martha confided in Nellie that George's spirit was still in their bedroom. She had seen him sitting up in bed, studying state papers and reports of national and international events. Was she afraid of her husband's ghost? Oh no. She is said to have replied, "It is just that he needs his quiet time to ponder the nation's fate." Martha had loyally stayed with George during the Revolutionary War, sharing his hardships of life in the field, including that bitter winter at Valley Forge. A woman of great tact, Martha knew to give her husband solitude when he confronted the pressing problems of leadership. She believed that his spirit was still preoccupied with the problems of the young nation, and accordingly she granted her beloved husband's shadow the undisturbed peace he required. Before the master bedroom was shut off from the rest of the house, several servants are said to have shared Martha's vision of George's ghost, comfortably reading and thinking in bed. It seemed to be quite common for spirits to show themselves at their final resting place. Washington's phantom is said to appear on occasion at the rock crypt on the grounds of Mount Vernon, where he and Martha lie side by side. Washington is said to appear as a misty figure, glowing slightly with a greenish phosphorescence. Supposedly he is most likely to appear near the anniversary of his own death, December 14th, and that of Martha's death, May 22nd. On the anniversary of Martha's death, the ghost of her husband allegedly places a bouquet of red roses atop her stone sarcophagus. Are the roses real? And if so, how did they get there? Martha Washington's ghost seems to confine its rare appearances to Mount Vernon in contrast to the many alleged sites of her husband's spiritual appearances. Like all the daughters of wealth in her day, Martha had been trained to be a loyal helpmeet to her husband, skilled in managing a household and functioning as a gracious hostess to advance her husband's career. Martha evidently enjoyed her hostess duties at Mount Vernon, but was less comfortable in her role as First Lady. Washington was acutely aware that as the first chief executive of the new nation, his every move would be set precedents and establish a role model for all succeeding presidents. Doubtless, Martha also was very careful to always demonstrate tact, dignity, and hospitality in her role as First Lady. Martha never canceled an engagement related to her public duties and never publicly complained of the endless round of official receptions. She did write to her sister, however, that I lead a very dull life. I never go to any public places. Indeed, I think I am more a state prisoner than anything else. There are certain bounds set for me which I must not depart from. It must have been with great sense of relief that Martha was able to return to Mount Vernon as a private citizen on March 4, 1797, the day the new president, John Adams, succeeded her husband. As would be expected, Martha's ghost makes only rare appearances and always at Mount Vernon, never in a more public venue. Martha's spirit is said to appear as a misty, faintly glowing form seated at the table in the dining room of the home she shared with George for nearly 41 years. Her phantom allegedly is most likely to materialize on the anniversary of her marriage to George, January 6, 1759. While Martha's ghost appears only in the tranquil domesticality of Mount Vernon, George's ghost has been observed in much more dramatic and public settings in addition to Mount Vernon and Woodlawn Plantation. Many people report seeing the heroic figure, resplendent in his general's blue and white uniform and tricorn, atop a great white horse. This inspiring image is said to appear often at Yorktown, the scene of his final victory as a military leader. It was a day of both public triumph and great personal satisfaction when the general accepted the British surrender of Yorktown. For several long years, Washington had led American troops against far superior forces, the more numerous, better equipped, and professionally trained soldiers of King George III. Washington well understood that, outgunned and outnumbered, he had to avoid being forced into a head-to-head battle he had little chance of winning. He would fight only when and where he was ready. Washington knew that he didn't need to win big time as much as he needed to avoid losing big time. He must choose his battles and have control over time and place of major confrontations. Washington's cautious strategy led to many strategic retreats. This frustrated the British generals who wanted to force battles on their choices of site and time. The British began calling Washington the Fox, and it was not meant as a compliment. In the hunts organized by English gentry, the fox's only hope against a pack of hounds in numerous gun-toting hunters on horseback is to run and hide. In the British view, running and hiding was what Washington did best. Their buglers were ordered to play fox hunting calls on their bugles, hoping to taunt Washington into taking a stand against the pursuing army. Washington never let his ego override his judgment. He didn't let himself be baited into an ill-timed battle just to prove his manhood. The fox really was foxy and ignored the British accusations of cowardice and mockery of his character. Washington had only disdain for British officers' pretensions that they were honorable gentlemen finding sniveling amateur traitors of the crown. When British General Lord Charles Cornwallis was compelled to surrender at Yorktown, Washington had his moment of revenge. It was customary for the defeated leader to personally hand the surrender document to his equal rank counterpart in the victorious army. Washington decided to break protocol and sent a low-ranking American soldier into Cornwallis's camp to accept the surrender. Although there is no documentary proof of which soldier had this rare honor, tradition says it was Private John Gray, who had served throughout the war as a teenager, lived and worked on Mount Vernon estate, and so, as military bands played the ironically appropriate popular tune, "The World Turned Upside Down," a humble private went to Lord Cornwallis. "Cornwallis wouldn't shake my hand," Gray gleefully reported to Washington. "Good," replied Washington. "He is not worthy of a good American soldier." To this day, some say the Phantom of Washington may be seen at Yorktown, a faint smile on his face as he accepts a rolled-up document from a grinning American soldier. Incidentally, it is said that the ghost of John Gray, who died in Harrisburg, Ohio in 1868 at the age of 104, rises from his grave on patriotic holidays dressed in his Revolutionary War uniform to salute the flag. It is perhaps predictable that Washington's spirit would be attracted to Yorktown battlefield, the site of his greatest victory, but his ghost's surprising appearance at the Battle of Gettysburg is much more widely known. Gettysburg was the scene of the greatest battle ever fought in North America, both in numbers of soldiers engaged and numbers killed in battle. The strength of 93,921 Union soldiers fought 71,693 Confederates. Over 3 days of fierce conflict, the Confederate casualties were 4,708 dead, 12,693 wounded, and 5,830 missing in action or captured. Union forces suffered 3,155 killed, 5,369 missing in action or captured, and an astounding 14,531 wounded. This terrible carnage has produced so many ghosts that Gettysburg may be one of the most haunted places in America. The long list of ghost stories about Gettysburg included at least 2 separate appearances by the Phantom of George Washington. It might seem perfectly natural for the great man's spirit to come to the aid of the Union at the moment when the nation faced its great peril, with its very survival at stake. Did Washington's spirit somehow see that the pivotal battle to preserve the United States was about to take place? The Titanic battle is often called the turning point of the Civil War. After Gettysburg, the South never again mounted a major offensive, and the eventual triumph of the Union was but a matter of time, although much blood would still be spilled. In both the widely reported appearances of Washington's ghost during this catalytic battle, the general's spirit clearly was favoring a Union victory, but Washington surely had an internal conflict about which side to champion, which goals to advance. Both the Union and Confederate sides regarded Washington as the hero and role model. From the Southern viewpoint, Washington was one of their own. He was a Virginian and a slaveholder. His step-great-granddaughter, Mary Ann Custis, was married to General Robert E. Lee, commander of the Confederate forces at Gettysburg. But in his lifetime he had fought for the ideals of the Union, was the major founding father of the United States, and had spent 8 years as its chief executive. Both versions of the story that Washington's ghost participated in the Battle of Gettysburg portray him in full uniform, riding his white horse and leading Union soldiers into battle, a battle Washington's spirit evidently knew that Union must win. In one widely circulated story, a contingent of Union soldiers had pitched camp units along the road of west of Hanover, Pennsylvania, having marched all day from Maryland. They were near McSherrytown on the road toward Gettysburg on what is now Route 116. It was the evening of July 1st, 1863, and the men were hot and tired. Campfires were lit and coffee was on the boil when orders came to break camp and resume marching. A great battle had begun that day at nearby Gettysburg. Grumbling and weary, the men began trudging to their destination. Then miraculously, they witnessed an awe-inspiring sight, and fatigue was replaced by patriotic fervor. Glowing with a pulsating light as though from an inner flame, the unmistakable figure of George Washington on horseback appeared at the head of the long line of soldiers. The dazzling phantom rode ahead, and then he turned and waited until the struggling line caught up, before riding on again. Washington seemed to be impatiently urging the men forward, communicating a sense of urgency by his actions. Morale soared and the pace quickened. The spirit of Washington was leading them toward triumph. In another version of the story, the ghost of Washington personally leads Union reinforcements into battle at Little Round Top, the hill that was at the southern end of the Union lines at Gettysburg. Washington's spirit had obviously comprehended the strategic significance of Little Round Top. If the Confederates had succeeded in turning or outflanking Union forces there, they would have caught the Northern armies in a pincer, and the crucial battle may have been won by the South. The appearance of Washington's ghost on the field of Gettysburg would be consistent with the actions of the living man. In life, Washington displayed great courage in personally leading his troops into battle, unmindful of his own safety. His bravery was legendary. As a young officer in the French and Indian War, no less than 4 bullets drilled holes into his coat, and 2 horses were shot out from under him as he led men into battle. His many close brushes with death convinced young George that he was a man of destiny, that God had plans for him and fate would spare him an untimely death. Washington's bravery inspired his troops then, just as his ghost inspired the Union to victory at Gettysburg. The ghostly figure of Washington at Little Round Top is said to have held aloft a flaming sword, pointing the way forward, not only for those troops, but for the Union as a whole. It is logical and consistent with the living man's loyalties, and his spirit would so forcefully favor in the Union cause. Washington's political philosophy is explicitly laid out in detail in his lengthy farewell address. This open letter to his fellow citizens was written at the close of his presidency. A major goal was to explain his decision not to accept the 3rd term. Ever conscious of his president-setting role, Washington wanted to underline his insistence on giving up personal power and ambition in favor of democratically elected successor. Past leaders of successful revolutions had always seized power for life and found dynasties. Washington could easily have been president for life, but he rejected that. When told that Washington intended to voluntarily leave power and return to private life, George III is said to have proclaimed, "Why, if he does that, he'll be the greatest man in the world." Washington's ghostly support of the Union cause at Gettysburg is foreshadowed in the farewell address, which was published in many newspapers across America. At considerable length, he warned contemporary and future Americans of the dangers of sectionalism. He emphasized that the North needed the South and vice versa. Every portion of our country finds the most commanding motives for carefully guarding and preserving the Union as a whole. Your Union ought to be considered as a main prop of your liberty, and that the love of the one ought to endear you to a preservation of the other. This is a long one. This definitive declaration is a clear precursor to this ghost's flaming sword at Gettysburg. Washington was a champion of firmly united country. Washington's phantom made a visit to Fort Monroe at the close of the Civil War. As at Gettysburg, his motivation was rooted in his anxiety to preserve his country. Fort Monroe is located at the Old Point of Comfort in Hampton, Virginia. It guarded the approaches to the harbor of the Hampton Roads. The largest brick fort in the East Coast, it would have been well known to Washington, having been established in 1609 to guard Jamestown. Known as the Gibraltar of the Chesapeake, the fort was used briefly to confine Jefferson Davis following his capture by the Union forces at the end of the Civil War. The former president of the Confederacy was kept in solitary cell deep within the fort. On Davis's first evening there, his jailer saw a strange greenish glow coming from his cell and heard what seemed to be a stern lecture from a visitor. Though no one could have entered the cell, a visibly shaken Davis admitted to having a vivid nightmare in which he'd been visited by Washington, who'd berated him for his treasonous betrayal of his country. Would a midnight visit to strongly express his anger at Jefferson Davis be in character for George Washington? Of course, given his animosity to sectionalism and his known habit of angrily reprimanding anyone who failed to carry out their duties and responsibilities. Contemporary reports noted Washington's awesome vocabulary of curses when subordinates missed crucial deadlines in battlefield tactics, for example. After Lee's surrender at Appomattox, effectively ending the war, Davis urged Southerners to continue a guerrilla-style war of terror from mountain hideouts. Fortunately for everyone, Lee swayed Southern opinion away from such actions. He observed that, as he waged war honorably, he would be honorable in defeat. It was over. Washington's ghost is alleged to make cameo appearances at a variety of other locations. His phantom is said to haunt the site of New York's Federal Hall at Wall and Nassau Streets, where he was inaugurated as first president. Other sightings are claimed to be at various battlefields, including those at Princeton and Monmouth in New Jersey. An interesting story is related by a young man who wishes to remain anonymous. Concerned that people would think he was only seeking attention, he has confided his experience only to his family and a few close friends. It happened on a recent 4th of July when his scout troop was visiting Mount Vernon, and has become customary. A Boy Scout was selected to lay a wreath on Washington's sarcophagus, and a Girl Scout performed a similar tribute at Martha's matching resting place. Chose to honor the president and nation's birthday. The young man swears he heard a faint voice say, "'Tis well," as he placed the wreath. Did George Washington himself have a supernatural experience during the winter he spent at Valley Forge? Washington himself did not record the experience in writing, but a close friend, Anthony Sherman of Philadelphia, reported that a ghostly vision appeared to Washington during a time when the general was under enormous pressure. The Revolutionary War was not going well. Washington's troops in winter quarters needed food, clothing, medicine, and ammunition. Morale was low, and Washington himself, understandably, was depressed. He couldn't pay his loyal troops. The situation looked grim. Then, as Sherman later recalled in a widely circulated newspaper accounts, a luminous vision appeared to the general. A spirit, or perhaps an angel, visited him in his headquarters. Washington allegedly told Sherman that the spirit showed him a magical map of the world, which changed before Washington's astonished eyes. The brightly glowing figure, which Washington called an angel of prophecy, showed him a United States expanding across the continent. The vision included a temporary crack in the map of the future of the United States, perhaps reference to the Civil War, but also showed a healing of this rift. Supposedly, when Washington came out of the trance-like state, he had a new hope for the future. He is said to have interpreted this strange vision as delivering two prophecies. Washington was destined to lead his country to independence, a country that would continue to grow in power and prosperity, and the nation would eventually face a tragic civil war, but would survive and reunite. The dramatic vision, whether it was a supernatural event or a dream produced by Washington's subconscious hopes and fears, may explain the general's renewed confidence in his cause and his abilities. So inspired, Washington was able to inspire his army and indeed his whole nation as he led them to independence. Phew, that was a long one. Lots of interesting trivia in there. Now I'm going to try to draw George, and he's going to look kind of scary, I think, but it's fitting, seeing as he was a ghost. I mean, right? Okay, let me get you down in here a little bit closer and see if I can get this gone here. I'm going to give him okay, I'm going to come down here. That's his cheekbone. And let's see. Here, along here. Hopefully I can get this done and it doesn't take too long, since this was a very long video, and I apologize for that. I didn't realize how long the story was. I hope none of these are too much more longer than that one was. Oh my goodness. There was a lot to read, and I'm sorry I read it fast, but I didn't want to hold you guys up and bore you to death. Although I hope none of you are asleep right now while I'm sketching. But if you are, just play back the video. Let's see. This is his other eye socket, which I should make a little bit. Oh, sorry about this. I'm going to make him a little bit smaller here. Okay, it's the other eye socket. And I'm going to use this right here. There's his nose. Guess you can see where I'm going with this. It's just me and my creepiness, I know. It's what I like. I like to be a little bit creepy. But he is a ghost, and he's a very old ghost, as a matter of fact, so you know he's not going to be his real self. Not as handsome as he was back then. I can't imagine. I'm so glad technology is so much better where we no longer have to wear wooden teeth if we need to change our teeth outlook here. Let's see. I will. That's where the teeth are going to go. It's good to be back home, but I still miss my son and my grandson. Got to spend a lot of good quality time with them. It was a fun experience. I like going back there. I've been to Yellowstone. I think that was my 3rd time, and it doesn't get old, believe me. I liked it. I like going there. And there's always the chance of seeing different animals and having a little bit of different experiences. But yes, it's someplace you definitely want to visit if you can get the chance. I got to go to Old Faithful, and we did the different oh, what are they called, those heated pools. That was something else. Saw a few bison. Did not pet the buffaloes. Do not pet the what is it? Do not pet the fluffy cows. And I did not pet the fluffy cows. Nope. No, thank you. I do not think I want to get that close. They are beautiful animals, but nope. Ugh. My nose is itching. Okay. I'll make his other cheekbone here. And we'll come over here. And let's see. I'm going to make this all dark in here. Around his teeth area. Okay. And this may not be the best, but I'm trying here. Trying to do it quick because I know it's been a long story. My son lives out in Etna, Wyoming, where we went, It was a 3-day drive. Oh my goodness. Talk about your car butt. We had rented a cargo van, and it was also a what would you call it? A journey, a beautiful journey actually. My husband took a route through South Dakota, because I had never been to South Dakota, and he had lived in South Dakota at one point, and he thought, he'd go that way and show me a few. We went to the Badlands, and we didn't actually go in the Badlands, but we went up to the point where you could go in, and because we didn't want to spend too much time on the road. I was in a hurry to go to see my grandson and my son, so we wanted to spend as much time we could with them at their house. So we didn't want to spend too much time traveling. And let me tell you something. I live in Pennsylvania, if you didn't already know that, and I thought we had some cool parades down our way. Now, where I live in Hamburg, Pennsylvania, we have an annual, it's a weird thing. It's a parade, and it's called King Frost Parade, which is like kind of ringing in the winter time. It's the last Saturday, always the last Saturday of October, and mostly the theme ends up being Halloween themed. Okay, so I thought it was always a cool thing, a cool parade, but we got to see and be at two parades, 4th of July parades in Thane and in Alpine, which are just like up the road a ways from where my son lives. And I'm going in there thinking, okay, this is just going to be a little parade. You'll see Boy Scouts and veterans and things like that in the parade. No biggie. And it's nice. It's nice to celebrate America's birthday. And I have never seen a more patriotic group of individuals. It was amazing. I mean, these people were amazing to me. And with our parade that we have here, you have to register in advance to be in the parade and all this other stuff. And I come to find out that my son was in the parade. My son and my grandson. My son drove a big truck and pulled a float, and it was a float designed by his stepdaughter, and who was in the future in the FFA, Future Farmers of America. And everybody got candy. And do you know, I've never seen this before, but it made sense. It was hot there. You wouldn't think it in Wyoming, but it got hot. And they actually threw freeze pops to the kids that were watching. I was just amazed. I'm like, that is such a great idea for something to throw besides candy. And another thing was, like I was saying, how it's sort of like you have to sign up to be in the parades here. You didn't have to there. If you wanted to be in the parade, you just went and lined up behind the one in front of you, and so on and so on, and you were in the parade. And it didn't matter, as long, they were patriotic. Oh my God, they were having such fun. such fun. And they gave out flags, and they gave out of course they did do some candy, and it was amazing, the patriotism. I mean, and the awesome part was they even did super soakers. They would put those things in water buckets, and they would spritz the crowd, and the kids loved it. And even some of the kids did it back. You know, they'd have them and they did it back. They would shoot their water guns at them back, and it was just so much fun. It was amazing. Even in the fire trucks. I mean, like, if you look in my shorts, I have some shorts out there that I have the parade. I actually have the parade, little bits of the parade, but I have the fire departments and stuff. They would actually use the hoses from their trucks and spray the kids that were lined up alongside the road. And it was funny because we were being first timers. We didn't know that was going to happen. And so we had people that were next to us. Everybody was really friendly. And we had people next to us who said, if you don't want to get wet, I would move, because if you stay out here, you are 100% going to get wet. So we took their warning, and everybody who didn't want to get wet would move out of the way. When it come to the end of the parade where the fire trucks were, they used the hoses, and they got everybody. I mean, they were squirting those big fire hoses and just drenching everyone. It was awesome. Okay, here's my idea of George Washington's ghost. Okay, I hope you like this story. I'm gonna do as many as I can out of this book. Hopefully they're not all long-winded like me. And I hope you enjoyed the sketch. And I hope to see everyone in the next one. Thanks for subscribing and stopping by. And we're back in it again. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.